This podcast is a proud member of the Lamb Podcasting Network. Find the network at largeassmovieblogs.com.
Hello and welcome to episode 79 of the 1001 Movies podcast, based on the book 1001 Movies You Must See Before You Die. This week, I'll be talking about 1997's The Ice Storm, directed by Ang Lee.
You know, golfing to me is something I'm supposed to enjoy. And I was on the goddamn golf team in college, so it's something one would assume I'd do well. I used to do well. But basically, these days, golfing for me is like hoeing or plowing. It's like farming. And George Clare has obviously, in the mere 2 years since he's been with the firm, he has obviously been taking secret lessons with a golf pro. And I bet the entirety of his disposable income has been dedicated to humiliating me on the golf course. The guy talks non-stop throughout the entirety of the miserable 18 holes on topics that are the supposed domain of my department. Yeah?
You're boring me. I have a husband. I don't particularly feel the need for another.
Ang Lee gained international recognition with The Wedding Banquet in 1993, but that film and Lee's life before it is a topic for another episode. Although The Wedding Banquet took place and was shot in New York City, it was a Taiwanese production by Lee's own production company, Good Machine. Lee's English-language debut was supposed to be The Ice Storm, but he was scooped up to direct Sense and Sensibility in 1995. After post-production on that film wrapped up, he dove into The Ice Storm. Ironically, the film's first day of shooting was the day of the 1996 Academy Awards, when Sense and Sensibility was nominated for Best Picture. According to sources, Lee was nonchalant about this fact and chose instead to focus on his current project. Based on the book of the same name by Rick Moody, The Ice Storm focuses on the lives of two neighboring families in New Canaan, Connecticut, on the week of Thanksgiving Day in 1973. In actuality, on this same weekend, New England was indeed struck by one of the worst ice storms in their history, leaving people without power for days. The plot is small and instead focuses on the two families. Ben Hood, played by Kevin Kline, is having an affair with Janie Carver, played by Sigourney Weaver, whose children, Mikey and Sandy, played by Elijah Wood and Adam Han-Bird, respectively, struggle with preteen angst and sexuality. Ben's wife, Elena, played by Joan Allen, is distant, nostalgic, and coming to terms with the fact that her husband is having an affair. Their daughter, Wendy, played by Christina Ricci, is the self-conscious catalyst of Mikey and Sandy's issues, while Paul Hood, played by Tobey Maguire, bookends the film with a metaphor about the Fantastic Four. All of this culminates on the evening of the titular ice storm, when the adults in the film experiment at a key party. Immediately afterwards, a tragedy occurs that ironically draws the characters together and forces their feelings to the surface. It's ironic that anyone ever wanted to buy the rights to Rick Moody's book, as it's borderline pornographic. In an opening scene, Ben masturbates into a pair of Janie's underpants and then tosses them into her son's bedroom. This obviously didn't make it into the final script. In fact, much of Moody's book is actually the final third of the film, while the first 2/3 were created by screenwriter James Schamus. He and Ang Lee pitched the film to Fox Searchlight as if it was a comedy, and while it certainly does have its funny moments, the movie's tone is nothing but. The irony of Lee's involvement in the project was that, having come to America in 1978, he had no notion of what Connecticut in 1973 was like, and the costume and set design people helped a great deal in shaping the look of the film, while the tone can certainly be credited to Lee Schamus and cinematographer Frederick Elms. Lee focused intensely on the characters and gave each of them a binder filled with newspaper articles from late 1973 as well as a CD with music from the era. He encouraged each of the main actors to write detailed biographies for their characters, explaining everything down to what they would eat for breakfast. Lee's attention to detail may have even rivaled that of Stanley Kubrick. He would encourage the actors playing characters within the same family to even adapt the same way of walking, although I'm unsure if that really shows in the final product. On the first day of filming, Lee insisted on the cast and crew participating in a Buddhist ritual for good luck, a tradition he did with at least every film up to then. I don't really know if he still does. Filming did indeed go smoothly, but for one detail that had to be manufactured. As they were shooting in March, it was unlikely they would get the beautiful ice effects that we see in the film's final act. What we see on the screen is not really ice. It's actually hair gel made to look like ice. In fact, they used so much hair gel on the train in the opening and closing scenes that they allegedly almost destroyed the train. The Ice Storm was a critical success, but it floundered at the box office. Come Oscar time, it wasn't even given a single nomination. Later, while Kevin Kline was at a promotion for In and Out, he was approached by a studio executive who bluntly apologized for bad marketing, both at theaters and during the Oscar buzz. There are clearly some performances, including Kline's, that are Oscar-worthy, but that year it was all about movies like Titanic and The Full Monty instead. There's nothing wrong with either of those films, but The Ice Storm is the type of drama that the Academy Awards seem to relish. Ang Lee, of course, moved on to make movies and win other Oscars, specifically for Brokeback Mountain and Life of Pi, both of which are topics for future episodes. The Ice Storm, meanwhile, seems to have left the zeitgeist of American cinema, although it's looked upon fondly by those who've made it, and arguably has a small cult following. But what did I think of The Ice Storm? I saw this when it was first released on DVD, and I was totally blown away. Like Ang Lee, I wasn't around in America in 1973, but somehow this film just seems to capture this particular time and place in a bottle. There are several references to Richard Nixon and plenty of polyester clothes, which, although we would laugh at anyone wearing them today, just looks so great in the film. There's a tone that makes this a pure period piece, however, and it's not just because of the clothes and the historical references. Everyone, especially the adults, seem as though they've just woken up at the tail end of history. In 1973, of course, the sexual revolution was just winding down, and these middle-aged adults seem to have missed it. Their curious discussions about pornographic films like Deep Throat and the awkward and drunken Key Party make them seem as new to sex as their teenagers. The film is bookended with inner monologues by Tobey Maguire as Paul about the Fantastic Four. For those of you not in the know, the comic involves a family in four, just like those families in the movie, who are gifted with superpowers. Listen to Paul's opening at the beginning.
In issue number 141 of The Fantastic Four, published in November 1973, Reed Richards has to use his antimatter weapon on his own son, who a nihilist has turned into a human atom bomb. It was a typical predicament for the Fantastic Four because they weren't like other superheroes. They were more like a family. And the more power they had, the more harm they could do to each other without even knowing it. That was the meaning of the Fantastic Four, that a family is like your own personal antimatter. Your family is the void you emerge from and the place you return to when you die. And that's the paradox. The closer you're drawn back in, the deeper into the void you go.
Who is Reed Richards a metaphor for? Is it the adulterous Ben? Jenny's aloof husband Jim? The radioactive son is arguably Elijah Wood's Mikey, and perhaps the sounds that he keeps hearing might be a ray of radiation, which appear in the film's final moments as a live wire whipping madly about. Ang Lee and James Schamus's coordination between script and visuals is exemplary. On paper, there are many scenes in which the characters chat nervously about mundane topics. On screen, however, the moments in between these lines is the most important, such as when Elena sees her daughter riding a bicycle. Ben carries his daughter back to their home. Mikey explores the sights and sounds of the ice storm, and seductive Janie returns home from the key party, acting more like a rape victim than someone who's just made love to a handsome young man. There's even a scene in which conversation is actively frowned upon. As they lie in bed together, Ben starts talking about golf, but Janie hushes him, explaining she already has a husband. The parallels between adults and teenagers are there just beneath the surface. Wendy acts confident and pretends to know everything about sex and sexuality, but even when she and Mikey are about to take each other's pants off, she puts on a Nixon mask as though she's too self-conscious to see what's happening with her own eyes. Ben is happy to exercise his sexual prowess, but the social awkwardness of the key party concludes with him drunk and passed out in the bathroom. Perhaps the most self-conscious of all is Elena, who shoplifts makeup from the drugstore and takes her daughter's bike out for a ride when no one else is home. The tone and the final scenes of the ice storm are oppressive, with the characters afraid to state what they really feel like. It's not until the final moments, when Paul is picked up by his family at the train station, and there's a tearful scene in the car, that there's a release of this oppression. But the absence of oppression leaves a feeling of depression behind it. It sounds like a critical remark, but I love just about everything about this film as a piece of art, although I would never recommend you get together with the family to watch as a Thanksgiving movie. That honor I've always felt should go to Pieces of April. Before this, Ang Lee was known for films like The Wedding Banquet and Eat, Drink, Man, Woman. Now he is known for Brokeback Mountain and Life of Pi. The ice storm, it seems, exists in a forgotten sliver of his career along with Ride with the Devil. This is a shame because I think it's Lee's best film. It obviously lacks the bravado of Lee's Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, but it takes a great deal of talent to make a viewer feel the feelings inspired by the ice storm. I can't emphasize how disappointing it is that this film received no Oscar nominations, particularly in a year when Jack Nicholson would win for As Good as It Gets and Kim Basinger for LA Confidential, both of which are quite good but are easily outdone by Kevin Kline, Sigourney Weaver, and even Christina Ricci in The Ice Storm. Kline, whose career seems to flip-flop between drama and comedy, is superb as the man who has it all but doesn't know what to do with it. And Weaver's Janie is arguably the most in-control character in the film, is a woman who is definitely on the verge of a nervous breakdown. Now, shame on you for that, Oscar. That's all I have to say about The Ice Storm, and this episode concludes Season 6 of the podcast. If you'd enjoyed it, please write something nice about it in the Apple Podcasts app. I'll be back to open Season 7 with 1976's Rocky, directed by John G. Avildsen. In the meantime, feel free to email me any questions or comments at 1001moviespodcast@gmail.com or contact me on Twitter at 1001moviespc. Until next time, happy viewing.